Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum to our audience joining us from around the world today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To the second episode of diving deep into the last 10 surahs of the Quran. We're joined by Imam Adam, our Imam and Quran teacher for today, who'll be taking us through some of the tafsir, some of the reading, the linguistics, and of course, you're all more than welcome to join us, engage on the comments, post your questions, and we'll be seeking to answer those. Today, we'll be going through Surah Al-Quraysh. And if it's okay with you, Imam Adam, I think what we'll start with is just an introduction to the surah from the study Quran, a bit of an understanding of what it is, and then we can start with the reading, inshallah.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay. So, Bismillah. I will read. So, the tafsir we've been using for this series so far is the study Quran. I really recommend the study Quran. It's a really good English tafsir. It takes some while to go through, especially if you're reading the Quran front to back, but it's a great tafsir in English and it's got lots of different commentaries. So, I'll introduce our surah of today, Surah Quraysh, which is 106. So, Quraysh is a Meccan surah and takes its name from the mention of the Prophet's tribe in the first line. According to several commentators, Ubay ibn Ka'ab's manuscript of the Quran had Al-Fil and Quraysh together as one surah. Had Al-Fil and Quraysh together as one surah. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani regards Ubay ibn Ka'ab's version as evidence that this is the proper reading, Fatah al-Bari. According to al-Zamakhshari and al-Razi, Umar ibn al-Khattab is said to have recited the two surahs as one when leading prayer. Ibn Kathir and others argue, although the two are connected in the meaning, they are to be considered separate surahs. And the first two verses of the surah remind the Quraysh of the blessing they have received in God, having preserved them and provided them with means for prosperity. Verses 3 to 4 provide the central theme that one should worship God, since all prosperity and protection come from Him. So already I'm seeing a lot of themes. I do see how they could be seen as linked together as one verse, actually. I do see a lot of overlap between what we were
Yeah,
discussing last time.
there's the themes that are similar. Also, the length is quite short, and also
Mm,
the beginning, as we will see, of Surah Quraysh is essentially mid-sentence, and so
mm,
it feels like it's a natural continuation of Surah Al-Fil. Now,
mhm.
someone might ask, well, how can it be like this? And
Yeah,
the actual explanation of that is that in the Quran, every surah connects with the surah after it and the surah before it, as long as there is one. Obviously, for Fatiha,
mm,
there's no surah before it, but the surah after it is what? Baqarah, right? Al-Baqarah. And so, what is the connection? As an example, from Surah Al-Fatiha to Surah Al-Baqarah. In Surah Al-Fatiha,
mm,
we ask Allah, Ihdina Surat al-Mustaqim, guide us to the straight path. And in Surah Al-Baqarah, the second verse says, Fihi hudan lil muttaqin. In it is guidance for those that are mindful and conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have
yeah,
this connection between Fatiha and Baqarah, right? So any two surahs, you take them together, the beginning and the end of one, the beginning of one and the end of the other will have some continuity, regardless. So but these two are in fact so close together, you know, that
yeah.
they were even considered one surah by some of
Mm,
the Sahaba. But they are separate, and that is what the Sahaba they landed on.
mm,
But at the early stages, there were many manuscripts of Quran, um, and it was during Uthman's time where he made sure that all those other manuscripts were voided, and he had the main manuscript that kind of made the final consensus of the Sahaba on
mm,
the order of the Quran.
100%.
So there was never
Yeah,
any
it just,
doubt. There's never any doubt that these words are from the Quran. It was simply
mm,
the organization of how it should be put into surahs.
Mm. I always wondered about that. I was wondering for a while, like where did the titles come from? But I think that came at the similar kind of time. They were kind of just titled by theme, and that wasn't something that came with necessarily the revelation itself. It was something that
Yeah,
they just used.
some of the titles came from the Prophet ﷺ, who would
Okay.
mention the theme of a surah.
Okay.
And then some of the titles they came afterward, or this is how the surah was known among the companions of the Prophet or the scholars among them. Um,
Mm.
and so even some surahs you will find have multiple names because the names were not revealed, but the names were kind of the central theme of a surah, or the most like Surah Al-Kahf. The
Yeah.
most famous story is the story of the cave, but there's actually many stories in Surah Al-Kahf. Surah Al-Baqarah, obviously very long surah, longest surah, has many different aspects, but the story of the cow, which is just a couple of pages, if not less, that is the one that's the memorable thing that the people they did. But
Mm.
Surah Al-Isra, which talks about Al-Isra wal Mi'raj, but it also talks about Al-Quds. So another name for Surah Al-Isra is Bani Israel. So Bani
Mm.
Israel is a name which the Prophet ﷺ himself used, and
Okay.
Surah Al-Isra is also a name. So
Uh-huh.
this is something that happens.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Awesome. It reminds me a little bit of as in, I guess when you have these verses that, like you said, they connect from the front and back. A slight detour, but I think it's interesting. It's observation is that when you actually, it's something. If you only ever read the Quran like over like a page or two at a time, you're never really going to get that level of continuity between those verses and see those themes come across again. It's something I really struggle with because I read Arabic incredibly, incredibly slowly. So I never really can get even like within the same like sorta. I can struggle to get the theme as much as someone which can read it fluently because they can just kind of see how those things go across. And like it's when people in Ramadan they'll just try to read the whole um, Quran like once a day or multiple times a day
Yeah.
even. And that's something you're going to experience if you don't really have that same either dedication of time or ability to read as much. I've tried. I again slight detour. I've tried to. I think I always go to the extreme when it comes to like the Quran. I if I decide to like sit down and commit, I'll go. I'm going to read all of the tafsir and the translation and read in Arabic all at the same time, and it takes a very long time to get through. It took me like a month just to get through Baqarah and Baqarah. It took me very long with that approach because I read really slowly already. Anyway, slight detour.
It's not about speed, but the more that you read, the more fluent you become, and then you can read more. I wouldn't say necessarily that you need to read a large volume in order to see these things. I think once you
Okay.
learn about the fact that they exist, and also the more that you become familiar, you automatically start to see it. Like once you become more familiar with the Quran in your reading, um, then the first time you complete it, you won't see as much. It's like a book. The first time you read the book, right? There's only
Mm,
certain things you notice. You read it again, now you might notice more things. You read it a third time, you might notice even more things
mm,
because you have a general idea of the story already. The first time you read it, you don't know what's about to happen next. So you're more focused on the major events. But now that you know the major events, now you're focused more on the details. And now, once you know the details, then you can see even the really small details. It's kind of like that, right? So the Quran is meant to
mm,
be repeated, and the Quran is meant to be recited over and over, because that repetition makes the meanings go deeper, and you're able to actually understand the intricacies and the beautiful
mhm.
parts of the Quran that Allah has represented for us.
Definitely. And I feel like there's an aspect of personal growth to that as well. Like when you read it, when the next time you come to it, you might have grown spiritually in a way which you weren't before, and you'll interpret
Mhm.
things to a deeper level. Like I've been reading the stories of the prophets. I forgot the name in Arabic. And when I go back to the Quran, I was like, oh wait, I know this story. Like I can connect it together with the stories of the other prophets, and it kind of fits together completely differently now
Yeah.
compared to before. I was like, I see the story in isolation, but I can't really connect it together with the rest of what's going on. So now it's like really plays out. So yeah, that's another aspect
Jazakallah
of it.
khair. Yeah, as you get older, you get more life experience, and now a verse may speak to you in a way it did not before, because now you have a new experience, you have more maturity, you have more time and energy to think about things differently.
Mm.
So yeah, for sure.
Jazakallah khair. I think we'll stop our detour and start reading, inshallah. Sorry about that. Okay, so I will jump into. So we introduced the surah, and we probably lost people. They're probably like, "What are you talking about?" Just check the comments. Okay, nobody said what are you talking about.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um,
Cool. We can get
okay.
started.
All
Bismillah.
right. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لإيلاف قريش إيلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف. The translation of this is translated in different ways. The first of them, at least for the favor of making Quraysh habitually secure in their trading caravan to Yemen in the winter and Syria in the summer. Um, so in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, you can see it feels like you're starting midway in the sentence, for the favor of making Quraysh secure, or maybe a more concise translation could be for the secure passage of the Quraysh, right?
Yeah,
For the secure passage of the Quraysh. This could be another translation of this. And what this really says is, um, it could be a continuation of Surah Al-Fil, where in Surah Al-Fil, Allah talks about what happened in the year of the elephant, the army of the elephant, the army of Abraha, and how it was destroyed. Why was it destroyed? لإلاف Quraysh, for the safety and security of the Quraysh. So li means for, ilafi means security. Quraysh is, of course, the tribe of Quraysh. The
mm,
tribe of Quraysh being the ultimate power of Arabia, and the year of the elephant and the deterring of the elephant and the army of Abraha was actually became part of the legend and the mythology of the Quraysh.
mm,
That everyone else respected them even more because of what had happened, because uh, Quraysh were given this mythology, in parallel, because it was like, wow, look how Allah protected the Quraysh, or look at how blessed the Quraysh must be
they had
that
law.
Allah intervened on their behalf against an enemy that they could not have withstood on their own. And so
Mm,
they kind of thought highly of themselves, and the rest of the peninsula, the ones who knew about this story in that region, they also started to think highly of Quraysh. And so the Quraysh, they developed a reputation for their power and for God being on their side, for Allah being on their side, um, as a result of that event. And and then Allah continues, for their secure passage in the journey of winter and summer. And I'll let you read the commentary there, and then
sure.
we can continue talking about it, inshallah.
Inshallah. Awesome. So this is the again commentary from the study Quran. So for the secure passage of the Quraysh, their secure passage in the journey of winter and of summer. This is the translation given here. Reading this verse as a continuation of the previous surah, it can be understood as an allusion to God saving the Quraysh from the elephant of Abraha, I think which you mentioned. See the introduction to Surah 105. Secure passage translates ilaf, which comes from a root. I can't make out that symbol. Lam. This comes from a root
The root
indicating that one.
Hamza Lam Fa. Hamza Lam Fa.
I just see a backward C.
Yeah,
Is my
that's the representation of Hamza.
Hamza Lam Fa? How would you pronounce that?
Hamza Lam Fa.
Oh, okay. Okay. There we go then. Hamza lam fa, indicating that one is familiar with something or resorts to it habitually. It came to be connected with secure passage when ilaf and the related word ilif were used as names for the grants of security that the Quraysh reportedly received from the surrounding powers Byzantium, Persia, Abyssinia, and Yemen. In the winter, the Quraysh would travel to Yemen, where they purchased spices and other commodities coming from India. Then, in the summer, they carried these to Syria, where they sold them and purchased agricultural products. According to some, this verse is an allusion to the respect the Quraysh received as keepers of the Kaaba, which compelled other tribes to grant them safe passage and thus contributed to their wealth. In this vein, it is related to 2967, or have they not considered that we have made a secure sanctuary while people are snatched away all around them? Do they believe in which is false, and are they ungrateful for God's blessing?
Mm.
That's quite far away. Yemen from where they would start in Mecca to go to Yemen and then to Syria. Syria feels like quite a trek. This is not at all an arbitrary journey. As in, like for us now, it's like yeah, between Mecca and Medina, you got the super fast high speed train, and it's just easy going. But these were all tenuous journeys. It's
Oh
something really,
yeah,
I
I
guess.
mean through the desert, right? Through the belly of the
Yeah,
desert, the heat and the lack of any kind of resources, knowing how to pass through those lands, they were entrusted with being able to make these journeys, these merchants and these caravans that would go. They knew the supplies it would take, how long it should take. They knew the routes to
yeah,
take to prevent being, taken over by raiders or bandits. And so they really had to be very, very, smart about how they did it. But that was their livelihood. That was basically
yeah.
their value add, is getting these products through the desert from all the way from India into Syria. I mean, coming from India to
Wow.
Yemen, and then they would bring it from Yemen to back to Mecca, then to Syria. Um, and then back from Syria, they would bring food, which would provide the sustenance of Mecca, because you cannot grow anything near or around Mecca, at least not in any good volume. Um,
Mm,
so these were obviously the big challenge that they had, but Allah made it for them, because they could have, you know, it's a very delicate balance, isn't it? Because if
mm,
someone decides that they will persecute the Quraysh, if someone decides that they're going to attack the Quraysh at any of these routes, then it would have been challenging for them. But once this mythology came around them, that they were protected by Allah
yeah,
Himself against the army of the elephant, then that also kept people at bay. Relating back to these two surahs being very highly related. But then their separation is also wisdom, because it wasn't just about the army of the elephant, but Allah gives His security to us regardless of whatever miracles, right? That the
mm,
security
yeah,
itself is a miracle. You don't necessarily need the army of the elephant to be turned away in order for this to be a miracle. But in and of itself is a great blessing of Allah, to have security. I mean, look at our right now. In August here, we've gone through 10 months of genocide in Gaza,
mm,
and they don't have security, they don't have safety,
mm,
and yet still they're making salah. Still, I mean, just the other week
yeah,
they were all there for Fajr, and they were killed praying Fajr. Subhanallah, they were killed praying salah. But they're still in the masjid praying salah, subhanallah, even after everything they've been through. And the rest of us who are in safety and security, we're the ones
not
whose
praying for
faith
that.
is, we're
Yeah,
the ones whose faith is dwindling, but they are the ones whose faith is so strong, mashallah. And so security can give us this false idea that somehow we had anything to do with it, when in fact Allah reminds the Quraysh that it was all His doing that they had this safety and this security.
mm. I remember I feel like I heard from somewhere. Maybe you can help me out a bit. Maybe there's a source I'm not aware of. that it's there's a certain level of um, piety that is granted with poverty, basically something along those lines. And this is what it
Hmm.
reminds me of. Like when you are like living on that edge, you're just so always aware of how dependent you are on everything. Completely dependent.
Mm.
Like it's us that are kind of, we're comfortable and nothing's, like there's no real, there's so many things that could possibly go wrong with this journey they would have to take from
Mm.
um, Mecca to Yemen. But equally, so many things could go wrong with any of our journeys, with any of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. You know,
Hmm.
it's that I listened to I went to London. There was a speaker from the States. I do forget his name. He came over. It was with them. I think like the Maghreb Institute. I don't know if you've heard of
Hmm.
them. From
Yeah,
them.
of
They
course.
they come to London. They come to London every now and then. Um, and he came and it was a thing about how to pray your best prayer, best salat. And the speaker, he said he was like really, he travels a lot to speak, but he's really uncomfortable with planes. So his best dua, his best recitation, his best salah, best everything, his best ibadah is always on the plane. Always on the plane. That's when he can get the most concentration in salah, the most, everything all of a sudden
Mm.
I felt that before. Like it's like sometimes it's hard to get up for Fajr, and it's all that. And if there's Fajr on the plane, and all of a sudden, okay, I'm not, if this plane goes down and I haven't prayed, there's no other way about it. So it's I think it's so difficult when you live in somewhere where you're not cognizant of your vulnerabilities at all. Equally when you have something, like drive. Most of us might drive a car every day. You might get in a car and you might not come back out that car. And it's quite morbid, but it's very true. It's not like it's any safer. I'm pretty sure driving is less safe than flying anyway, and people are more more cognizant of their salat in a plane than they would be in a car. Um, yeah, maybe for them. So maybe for them, they in that period they were like, "This is what we do. It's fine." Or I don't know, or maybe maybe but it's not that necessarily having the abada would make you fearful of that. It's just that it would give you the confidence and a abada to just have that trust in it. So
Yeah, it's
that
gratitude, isn't it? It's gratitude at the end of the day. And we will see in the next verse, what should be the way of gratitude for
mm,
Allah giving you safety and security. What should be the way forward for that, as we will see in the next verses. But, as you mentioned, um, how comfort leads us to believe this false sense that we don't need Allah. And Allah does
mm,
talk about this in the Quran. Any positive quality, any positive thing taken to its extreme becomes negative. So confidence is good, but taken to its extreme, confidence becomes arrogance, right?
mm,
Humility is good. To put others over yourself is a good thing. It's a positive quality. However, to do it too much can lead to disgrace. To do it too much leads to disgrace, where you're not actually able to stand up for yourself or anyone else. Where you bring disgrace to what you believe in, because you're not able to actually move things forward. So humility also has limits, and confidence also has limits. That it not become arrogance. In the same way, self-reliance, self-sufficiency is a positive quality in Islam. To be
mm,
self-reliant, to be self-sufficient, to not be in need of others. This is a great quality. But taken to its extreme, one begins to think that they don't even need Allah, that they don't even need their sustainer, that they don't even need their creator.
mm,
And that is where that positive quality taken to its extreme self reliance becomes negative. And someone who relies only upon themselves actually can become arrogant, but also becomes ungrateful, also can become frustrated and angry with themselves because they rely only on themselves to such a degree that they believe that everything should be in their control. And the pandemic showed us that
mm,
human beings are not in control. And
Yeah.
these weather events that are happening do show us that we are not in control, as much as we think we are. And at the end of the day, our safety and our security is something that comes from Allah. And so, what is it that we should do in response? The next verses will tell us, inshallah.
Inshallah. And one comment I just had on that was Jazakallah khair, for what you'd mentioned. And one thing that I really kind of made me reflect on is when we have, I think it becomes almost obsessive when you have those people with the self-reliance part you were talking about. It's probably more harming for that individual to be thinking along that line. If you're one of those guys and you're like, all of my sustenance is in my control, all of what I earn, my control. I work 80 hours a week, and I can push the world to give me my sustenance as I please. When things eventually don't go your way, then you have no one else to blame but yourself. You just all that energy just will turn on you, and you'll just go, well, what did I do? Even if you did nothing wrong, there's still a chance that well, of course there is, that you might not have that sustenance, and all of a sudden you've just got this crushing force upon you. So even then, I feel like it's maybe sustainable in the short term for you to go, okay, yeah, it's all just me. One of those guy, I don't know why. All I can imagine is some guy in consulting doing 40 hours a day, something along those lines. Anyway, we'll move on before I offend anyone else in consulting.
That's all right. They can handle it.
They can handle it. Okay.
All right, we'll continue, inshallah. If you scroll down a little bit, and we'll finish the rest of the surah here.
Yeah, let me just get to the window. There's my window. Bismillah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّنْ خَوْفٍ. So let them worship the Lord of this house, the one who fed them against hunger and made them secure against fear. So let them worship once again this house, meaning the Kaaba, the Lord of this house, the one who has fed them against hunger and made them secure against fear. So please go ahead, read the commentary, and then we can discuss it, inshallah.
Inshallah. Awesome. So I think the translation is pretty much the same here. So this house means the Kaaba. These verses implore the Quraysh to acknowledge that it is not through anything of their own doing or through the idols they worship that they have been made safe, but through divine protection alone. In the overall context of the Quran, these verses allude to the fate that will befall those who reject the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The best example of this theme is 61:112 to 13. God sets forth a parable, a town secure and at peace, its provision coming onto it abundantly from every side, yet it was ungrateful for the blessings of God. So God let it taste the garment of hunger and fear for that which they had wrought. A messenger from among themselves had surely come unto them, but they denied him. And so the punishment seized them while they were wrongdoers. See also Abraham's prayer in 2:126. The first thing that strikes me, I used to, before I had learned otherwise, I used to get very scared of living here because I was like, what if everyone in this town keeps on persisting and not having a birth and just sitting? Am I just gonna? Is this like some asteroid gonna hit this city and we're all gonna get smited? I later found out that it was those. Well, from what I understand, those large scale humanity level destruction events were one of the blessings of our Prophet, peace be upon him, was that those were no longer a thing we were threatened with. But we're still obviously that doesn't really let us off the hook because we're still threatened with the ultimate judgment, and there's still worldly effects to the things that we do, as in I'm sure there's other things I experience as a result. Maybe not a meteoroid, maybe not an asteroid, but um,
Jazakallah khair. So yeah, in these verses, Allah tells us what is not just to the Quraysh but to everyone, that what is the obligation or requirement of the safety and the security that you are blessed with.
mm,
The obligation on us is فَلْيَعْبُدُوا, so worship. So that tells you what is our worship an expression of. Our worship is ultimately an expression of gratitude for all the blessings that we have, in addition to security and safety. Um, and um, the primal things that Allah mentions that He has given is He relieved them, الذي أطعمهم, the one who fed them against hunger, وآمنهم, and gave them safety from fear. So not having fear in your life, not fearing for your safety, fearing for your life, and not being
mm,
hungry are two of the greatest blessings that we take for granted, because we believe that somehow we are the ones who are saving ourselves from hunger and saving ourselves from fear. But things can change in an instant. Things can change so quickly. You can go from not being in fear to all of a sudden now you're in fear, and go from not
mm,
being hungry to all of a sudden being hungry. Things can change very quickly. Um, and it's not just the threat of that, but it's just the fact that Allah has given you this. Appreciate it, and your appreciation will ultimately be seen through your worship of Allah. And what does it mean to worship Allah, right? Reminding the connection to this house. Allah reminds the Quraysh of the connection to this house, meaning the Kaaba, that's right in front of the
mm,
Quraysh, in particular them. So, speaking again, connecting back to Abraha and his army who had attacked the house, and who
mm,
they thought that they had saved themselves, but actually it was the fact that the house was there that saved them. Because if the Kaaba was not there, well, the army might not have come to
mm,
attack it. And even the story of the army is that they came and the Quraysh fled. There was nobody there to protect the Kaaba. Actually, the Kaaba defended itself,
mm.
subhanAllah. Um, so reminding them, this house is what protected you, by the way. This house is what protected you. You didn't protect yourselves. So
Mm,
don't get ahead of yourself. Like, don't get ahead of
yeah.
yourself and think that you had anything to do with it. Number one. So worship Allah. And so what does it mean to worship Allah? Part of ibadah, right? Ibadah is so many things. Ibadah is your salah. Ibadah is also zakah. Giving to others is ibadah. Being generous
Mm,
to those around you is ibadah. Your relatives first and foremost, and then those that are in need. Your relatives that are in need taking the ultimate priority, um,
mm,
and giving the zakat, doing the fasting, doing the hajj. Of course, these are all ibadah. But ibadah also is al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahi al munkar, right? To to make some change in the world around you is also ibadah. Like the Prophet ﷺ, he made change in his world. He brought justice into his world. He did not let injustice stand.
mm,
He fought for the people that did not have much at all, and he freed slaves, and he did all kinds of acts. These were all worshiping of Allah. So don't think that worshiping Allah is only one thing, but it is this vast thing that the Prophet ﷺ did throughout his life. His akhlaq was a type of worship, right? Being how we treat others is a type of worship. How removing harm from the road is a type of worship.
mm,
How smiling at in the face of your brother and bringing joy and happiness to your brother or your sister is, to your mother, to your father, to your children. This type of joy is also ibadah, is also a type
mm,
of sadaqah. Um, so ibadah is so much, and all of that ibadah is done with this intention that we are appreciating the one who feeds us and the one who keeps us safe. And you find that the Palestinians, are such a great example that
yeah.
they are actually probably the most deprived of both of these things, and yet they
Mm,
continue to worship Allah in such a sincere manner. They know that in one way, they know who they are truly dependent upon, and they realize that they rely ultimately on Allah. That all the distractions are have been removed because
Mm.
there's no one else to depend upon, subhanallah.
Fine.
Whereas us, we depend on so many things. We depend on the government. We depend on, you know, all the tools of whatever the government is today, whether it's the militaries, whether it's all kinds of things that bring us um, safety and bring us food and all these supply chains and all of that that we saw disrupted during the pandemic and that we still feel the effects of today due to inflation
Mm.
and so on. But worshipping Allah is appreciating all of this. Um, and that is what the Prophet says.
One thing that, Jazakallah khair, sorry. Um, I think one thing that what you said made me reflect on a little bit, and what this verse has made me reflect on, is the parallel. So we've had the Quran and the Prophet revealing, peace be upon him, the Quran 1400 years ago. And looking at this verse and seeing how, so you're relieved of hunger, we who relieve them of hunger made them safe from fear, who are also dependent on stuff like trade with other nations and trade with other. I feel like what we have today, in its essentials, is like, so humanity between all of the prophets had still a lot of growth and development. But really, from the time of the prophet till now, okay, fine, we have boats now that are a bit bigger, but it's fundamentally the same. And I feel like that's, part of the wisdom of why the Quran came when it did and why the Prophet came when it did, is the humanity is at that point of development. I know this is a slightly out of pocket kind of item, but I feel like it's for me that's just made me think. Well, we're still talking about dependence on other nations. It's fundamentally the same challenges they had then that we have now. Seasonal changes, crops gone, no food. It's and the same thing with what you said with the Palestinians. It comes down to, again, food, hunger and safe from fear. As far as we've developed in the last 1400 years, it still comes down to the same thing. There's two very very basic necessities that are still we can find today examples of it being. There's populations where there's lots of people without those two things: food
Mm.
and safety from, well, safety, yeah, food and safety. That's it. And we're not even at the point of, central heating, air conditioning, all these luxuries. We're not like, fear from, being too warm or whatever, like right now. Um, it's always just comes back to those basics.
Mm.
SubhanAllah, and I just think it's one of those things that I find quite well, miraculous when we read through this. It's just you can tell that we're receiving something from a being that has no relation to time, past, present, or future. It's something that was crafted for that time and this time, that every time afterwards, and was
Mm.
perfectly placed at the time of revelation for that time.
Jazakallah khair. And this is kind of, I guess, my last note on this is, uh, you can divide this into three parts. So,
Yeah,
food and relief from hunger is the physical, is the body. So,
yeah,
it's a representation of the physical, right? So, Allah saved us physically from our physical needs: food, drink, oxygen, right?
mm,
Um, uh, Safety from the elements, right? Physical elements, like you said, air conditioning, heating,
yeah,
right? All of these are an extension of the physical. Hunger is a representation of the physical, the body. And then fear is something of the mind, right? Fear is in the mind, um,
mm,
because the fear that we feel is different from the fear that they feel, right?
yeah,
The fear that we have for what you call first world problems, right? Well, our
yeah,
fears are relatively small, and then their fears are relatively big. So fear is a thing of the mind. And so, what is the obligation from? The obligation, worship is from the heart, right? Worship is from the heart. Worship is not just from the mind. As Ali said,
mm,
if worship is just from the mind, then we would wipe our feet from the bottom and not the top, right? We would wipe our
Mm,
feet, our socks from the bottom where it gets dirty and not from the top, right? Um,
mm,
so worship is not just a thing of the mind; it is actually from the heart. If you see something wrong in the world, right, your mind might tell you this doesn't affect me. So why do I need to get involved?
mm.
This might actually bring me harm
Yeah,
if I stand up for something that doesn't affect me. But the heart tells you that something is wrong and it needs to change, and that's worship of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Um, the mind might tell you, "Oh,
subhanallah.
I have 100 things to do. Do I really need to make time for this worship?" Your heart tells you, my worship is where how I appreciate Allah. And and then that's all within the physical constraint, of course. So you have the body, you have the mind, and you have the heart, right? The body and the mind are saved, and so the appreciation, it comes from the heart.
Subhanallah. It's a very holistic view. It's altogether. It's not any focus on one or the other. I have a theory, and tell me if I'm too out of pocket here. I have a theory that the new religion of the UK after Christianity, it's the number one religion. I call it the religion of it's just common sense, and this is what they say, not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Hear me out. Hear me out. Right. So what they'll have is basically they'll purport some value, moral value, etc. Otherwise, and it might be like a big deep thing, a life value. Might be like something like shallow, like I don't know which sand do you slide on, which sand on the road do you slide on. But then the root of all understanding and reason in the minds of someone is it's just common sense. It's just reasoning over the mind and nothing else. And I assume everybody else has the exact same reasoning of mind I do. It's a very interesting thing going on where I think people think that their common sense is the same as everybody else's common sense. We actually have a minister for common sense. Like it's actually that like it's a government minister and it's called the Minister for Common Sense because it's like, oh, there's things that just don't. So what I think is going on here is people we've had this there's this pride in, as you said, just the mind. We would wipe our feet from the bottom rather than the top. It's just the mind. I'm just going to listen to my mind. My mind tells me to do this, I'll do this. My mind tells me to do that, I'll do that. If society is doing this, so my mind says go with society, do that. Um, it's my observation of what I think is going to become after Christianity. Well, obviously Islam is mashallah, growing quite well in the UK, despite some uh, some people going, no, it's the worst thing for us. But behind
I
that
mean,
we
you
have
look at what, yeah, Jazakallah khair. I
yeah,
mean, you
so
look at what's happened since October 7th. You see so many people coming to Islam, right?
yeah, we had that guy who, as we were mentioning before, I saw him. It was like he was, I think he was a Christian. He was on YouTube and he streamed himself reading the entire Quran in English from front to back. I know that's like not something like
Wow.
we talk about like, reading the Quran multiple times, but he was so he had the translation. He was like it was a bit interesting because he wasn't wearing a shirt and he was like marking each chapter in a marker pen along his arm. So along the end of it, he looked like he was like in a prison cell and he had like lines all over him, and it was
So
very
strange.
it was interesting. It was, but like he did this. He had like a series. I forget his name. He had a series where he like read all of the. He read the Quran and then like, oh, but you have to read this book and you have to read the Bible now. And you have to read this. So he read all of them, and it's been a few months, and he's been on like some podcasts with some other like big name speakers, which have like basically called him out and said, "What are you waiting for? If you've done all this analysis and all that." And basically
Mm.
now he's like a kind of he's one of those people that are basically Muslim but just haven't really said anything about it. Like I'm fasting, I'm praying. I'm not a Muslim, but I'm fasting
Wow.
and praying. MashaAllah.
Subhanallah.
I, I think we have figures like that in Islam. We have figures that like there's big like Christian writers, Christian academic writers I've heard of that write so much on Islam, almost more than
Mm.
Christianity. And they have so many of the same values, but just so that they can be that voice, I feel like just so that they can be that voice outside of Islam on Islam as a positive light and to retain that kind of view from the rest of the community. They just don't say they're Muslim. I feel like there's a bit of that going on. That's my another another of
Mm.
my
It
As
could
another,
be, you
as
knows
yeah,
what's in someone's heart, or even what it's in someone's mind, and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. You can only go by the zahir, you can only go by what's apparent. And we can only judge based on what's apparent, so um, in
very
terms
true,
of ummah or whatever. But
very true.
yeah, it could be that the ummah is larger than what you think, than what you know, because of this reason. Because people are for whatever reason, hiding, or not ready yet to come out with what they truly believe. So may Allah help them, give them strength, inshallah. It's a big deal. I mean, those of us who were born Muslim, we don't know what a big deal it is to drop everything that you know in order to come to Islam. And so we don't realize how difficult that is. Um, May Allah help them, may Allah help them, may Allah guide them. إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ. You don't guide who you love, but Allah guides whoever He wills. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us all, inshallah.
Inshallah. It's a good
Jazakallah khair.
reminder. Jazakallah khair. Yeah, good reminder for myself as well. Not to hold that judgment back, as you mentioned, and obviously judge what's unapparent. We had a brother who came to our um, Jum'ah last Friday, he's Irish. He comes across very English, and the other brothers started to talk to him, and obviously went into the routine of this is this and this is this, more explaining. It turns out this guy he's done Islamic universities in Saudi Arabia. He probably speaks Arabic better than all of us. He's very well engaged in multiple Muslim international Muslim forums, and all sorts. So all the brothers were swarming, ready to bring under the wing, and it was basically the other way around completely. All because we assumed that it was oh, it's someone from not our community. It must be someone who no, we got schooled big time. It was interesting to listen to that. It was interesting to listen to of his I enjoy I think people from being born here and listening to other people that were also born here but kind of came to Islam in their own through their own journey gives an interesting light to a kind of British cultural take on Islam. So there's none of that cultural kind of baggage with it. It's just Islam, and then maybe some of the the culture they carry with it is all the good things that are left from British culture. They keep the good things that are left. So it's interesting. That's why I like figures like Abdul Hakim Murad. They kind of take that in an interesting way. So it enhances what that culture is rather than just takes the bad bits. Anyway, that's another little detour. Lots of detours today. Jazakallah khair. Sorry for taking your time and everyone else's. Hopefully it's
No,
been
no,
good.
you're good.
Next week we will be going into al-ma'un, which translates to small kindness. I thought ma'un was a plate. Maybe this is Iraqi slang or something. What's
We'll find out next week,
we'll find out.
inshallah.
We'll find out next week, inshallah. Okay, we'll see you all next Monday at 5 p.m. GMT. We'll go through a couple of promos briefly just to share with you guys. We still have our Amazon book on sale for $15.99 now. That is wrong. If I just should give you the QR code here actually instead of that, so it's accurate. There we are. So we have a Learn the Arabic Alphabet book, which actually helps you understand the phonetics of the Arabic alphabet. You probably saw me struggling earlier with how to pronounce some of those letters. Maybe this would help you with that if I had read this book. I think it does ship internationally, so I do have no excuse. So yeah, this is a great book for actually learning the Arabic phonetics from the English language. So it's great for new learners like we've been discussing, maybe people that are born in English-speaking countries and speak English first. This will be a great book to actually, it's just one of those first step books. It's good to have those foundations strong before you continue on the rest of your Quranic journey. And one thing I would really like to share with you guys is our beta program. So we are working on a new feature, which we're very excited to share. There you are. I think you lost me for a second there. So there is a new feature I would like to talk to you about, which is our Quran clips. And we need some of your help to get this feature pushed out. It's something we're beta testing. We need some of you to come on and test this feature. It's exclusively to iOS. So Quran clips is a way to actually share recitations with other Quranic users so that they can actually be inspired by your recitation. You can be inspired by others' recitations. And I think it's something really important so that we can have more of our ummah see how our other parts, how see more of our ummah see how other Muslims actually progress and how they get better at reading the Quran over time. I think inspiration is something really important to our communities. Not everybody has the experience to be having that inspiration in person, so this is something really important to us here and important to a lot of us, is to actually being able to have that inspiration. Um, inshallah. But we do need your help with testing it. It's currently in iOS. Our biggest thing right now is making sure that it's ready for the whole ummah to receive. So if you do want to be part of that and help us develop this product, please do scan that link. We will give you a special something as a result of help, as a gift for helping us out. And it's something that will, inshallah, go on to contribute and benefit the rest of the ummah, inshallah. That will be all for today's program. I really appreciate you joining us today. Next week, we'll be live at Monday, 5 p.m. GMT. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.